Hey everybody, welcome back to DDJ's Inferno, the weekly show where we talk about men's issues. Today we have documentarian Michael Combs for Cash and Prizes with us today. He's been traveling in Europe, so we just wanted to kind of touch base with him and get a follow-up and see how things have been going in his neck of the woods. It looks like I'm getting some feedback from somebody. Michael, I think it's your feedback from you. I believe so, yes.
Oh, that's really bad. All right, you have to give me a minute then. I'll have to do a hardwire.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple shill alerts. That'll give you time to do that real quick. And of course, Michael has his version of Mr. Bigglesworth, Sugar the Chihuahua. So for those of you who are new to the channel, you can support me through Patreon. You can also, if you scroll down below, you can go ahead and check out my book, The Feminist Lie. It was a bestseller on Amazon. And Minds.com, we have a... that's an interesting sound. Minds.com, we have a MGTOW group there. In addition to that, you can also follow me on Bitchute, and you can follow me on misandrytoday.com, and of course, gab.ai. So with that said, again, we've got Wolf, and we have Rose, so part of our Thought Lives Matter crew. And then, of course, if you have Twitch Prime, feel free to support me. You can subscribe to me via Twitch Prime. It costs you nothing and definitely helps out the channel. I think we've got our technical issues handled, so let's kind of see where we're at. Michael, go ahead and talk, and let's see how we're sound.
All right, how do you hear me? Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little bit low, but I think it'll be all right.
All right, hold on. Let me press this stupid thing.
Yeah, you may have to actually hold the microphone depending, but we'll see.
All right,
go
is
ahead.
that better?
Oh, that's 100%
That's
better.
better.
Perfect.
All right,
Perfect.
there we go. All right, we're going to do a hardwire. It's all an experiment.
All right. Life is good. So with that said, Michael, welcome back to DDJ's Inferno. Talk to me about a little bit. I know you've been traveling in Scandinavia, I should say. Go ahead and talk to me about that and tell me kind of what you saw over there.
I spent, 3.5 weeks in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, the whole bit. I spent time in Iceland and Denmark and Sweden. Spent a lot of time in Germany, some time in Austria, talking a lot about what's going on. I asked questions about the divorce system, this and that. And we talked a lot about migrant crisis. And I have 2 children. One of my children is like, little 7-year-old blonde hair, blue-eyed little girl. And it was very interesting when I was in Copenhagen. I was going to basically hop over to Malmo, which is, for those who don't know, there's a huge bridge they built across from Denmark to Sweden. It's caused a lot of trade. It's been very beneficial for Denmark on some level. And I had talked to a lot of people, and they had really warned me, I really need to be careful if I'm going to go into Malmo directly and stop and look. And to really watch my daughter specifically. It was kind of really eye-opening in essence. Other fascinating things were I spent a week in Iceland, and we were talking a lot about how divorces work in Iceland. And when I said that basically, in 45 states, if you're a woman, you're going to get 27 days with your children. If you're a man, you're going to get 4. And their jaw just gasped open. They just really couldn't believe it. I said, and guess what? If you're LGBT, if you're homosexual, you're going to get 15 days. And they gasped open and more. And one woman was really interesting because the education rate is really high in Iceland. And what they said, this one woman said was, isn't it very interesting that the land that was built on slaves has a really hard time recognizing exploitation, which I thought was very telling. Anyway, are you still there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Now, I'm trying to do some solving of. There's a little bit of mic feedback coming from your mic, but I think that it's doable. So anyway, doable. So you were saying about the feedback you were getting from kind of how divorce happens in the United States.
Yeah, that was the feedback. I mean, it wasn't just one person; it was multiple people. So for those that don't know, basically, if you're from Belgium, Holland, which is the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Iceland, which are basically Scandinavian countries. Holland and Belgium kind of not, but they've adopted it.
Right.
You're going to get your kids half the time. And there's a reason why, because they basically say it's only fair, it's better for the children's life outcome. And because there's such high social systems and high taxes, they expect you to be able to work. It's what I would call, what our team is calling the divorce rate premium. What's the divorce rate premium? It's basically this. If you are a woman, you're going to, 9 times out of 10 if you're college educated, and 8 times out of 10 if you're not, you're going to be the one that initiates divorce. And you're going to be one that's going to basically, you're going to get your kids, you're going to get all the money. And in 41 states, they're equity states, so you're going to qualify for roughly 82.5%. Plus, you don't pay for any cost of that divorce, or maybe 20% of the cost. It's cash and prizes, quite simply.
Right.
So what ends up happening is that in your life outcome as a woman, you're going to have these children, or you're going to divorce rate, and you may do it 1 or 2 times in your lifespan. But what's going to happen to you is that you're going to cash out in your 30s, and you're going to pick your feet up most of the time. It's basically, you compare this to lottery winners, inheritance receivers, people from what economists would compare to as people that have just want to attain it, so therefore they take it. And when they take it, they spend it. So what happens to these women, in essence, is that the cost of committing divorce rate is that in your late 40s and 50s, you haven't been focusing on your career, doing all that, et cetera, and you're going to be broke. You're going to be struggling to make a go of it. And that's the hidden secret that society does not tell you, and moms don't tell you.
I have a quick question for you. I'm assuming that's your phone underneath the book that's sitting there on the chair?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you do me a favor and stick it on the other table? Because I think the phone is creating the feedback with your mic.
Is that better?
No, it's still it's the Wi-Fi thing. Yeah, I think that's going to keep. This happens to me sometimes when I have a Wi-Fi connection. So let's try that and see. Yeah, there it is. It went away.
I turned off the. I put on airplane mode.
Oh,
so that solves it.
It came back. No love. It's going away and coming back. It's really weird. All right. I think.
Oh man.
What is? Yeah. Okay. I think that's all right. So. All right. So, yeah. And I think that, the sad part about it is that I know that you're doing a documentary on this. I know you've got a research team that's really been going out of their way. So you traveled all around and you were kind of telling all these people, this is what happens in the United States. What was their feedback? What is their thought on what happens in their countries?
They think it's appalling. So the other problem is that you have countries like the United Kingdom where it's even worse for men than it is the United States, which is unfounded. Then you have other countries like France that do 50-50s, so for those who don't know what a 50-50 is, it's basically you can do a week on, week off. There's what's it called, a 2-2-5-2, where somebody gets Mondays and Tuesdays, the other person gets Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then you rotate Friday to Sunday, every other, and that's the one you change off. So that's how you get your 2-2-5-2. Or what typically happens in France is essentially one party will get half the year, other party will get the other half the year. When I ran into a group of Germans last year traveling, they were very much into the 80-20 model, and they just really did not want to change that model. And these were men. That men did not have a concept of, well, what are you going to do if you live in Stuttgart and she lives in Munich? Well, the issue is that if you want to have half your access to half your children, or vice versa, your kids want half the access to you, and you care about their life outcome, you stay.
Right.
And the other common thing for parental alienation, a big demarcation for parental alienation is picking up and moving cities. Meaning, so what happens to most women, not all, but most, is that what they'll do is they'll pick up, they'll leave the home, or they'll pick up and they'll leave the home and they'll move cities, or they'll move halfway across town because they want a fresh start. Well, that's a hallmark for parental alienation, because think about it. If you really care about the life outcome of the children and the best interest of the children, why on earth would you pull them out of their school, get rid of their dad, change their home, change their lifestyle, and do everything all in a fell swoop, all because what you wanted. It works out great for one person, works out terribly for the children, and then the husband.
Of course. Of course. And of course, the life outcomes are a lot worse for society as well. So,
oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, virtually every social problem we face has to do with this issue.
So talk to me about Malmo. I mean, when we talked earlier, you kind of shared some stuff with me that was really kind of disturbing. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about, taking your children over there, that whole thing.
I live in Colorado, so it's the crime stats are very low, et cetera. I live all over the world. I live in India, I live in Kenya, I live in South Africa. I've lived in Hawaii, in Texas, in DC. I lived in London. I mean, these are not just for like stints of like 2 weeks or a month. I mean, I've lived for years in these locations. And in the United States and Colorado, I can put my kids on non-helicopter mode and be like, this is all good. And when you have taxi drivers and concierge individuals grab your arm and pull you aside and say, look, you really need to watch out for your daughter. And we explain where you're going. Like, dude, most Danish women don't go over to Malmo, like at all, because they are literally afraid to being raped, and quite literally. I read this awesome book. Let's see if the light will get it. It's called The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray. If you're really interested in what's going on and you want to future project of what Europe's going to look like, and maybe even the United States, you need to read this book. It's 10, 15, I don't know, it's whatever. You can also get it on Audible. Sign up for Audible, get it free. I get no money for this. What's amazing about The Strange Death of Europe is you have so many issues going on, and nobody wants to talk about it. What's really going on is that when you see things like, I think there was a poll, there's a thing in 2012, I'll have to look it up on my phone here a second. All the rapes in Norway in 2012 were by non-Western men, committed by non-Western men in Norway. And by the way, they're up like X amount, %. I think the other issue was that in Sweden, 63%, this was 2 years ago, want to expel the Muslim migrants. But here's the other thing I thought was really fascinating. Okay.
Go for it.
So let's say that you're a man and you wanted to consider not being divorced raped in one of these countries. So the thing about Sharia law is that you have a parallel system of justice. But a lot of people say that all family courts are parallel system of justice anyway, because you have gynecologism. You basically have a rule for women and a rule for men, hence the 27 days for a woman for children and 4 days a month for a man, right? But that doesn't really jive very well as far as like you can be transphobic, the whole bit. I mean, how's that work in the real world? But anyway, the long and short of it, all of that really has to do with how is Islam melting into the European culture. But the other issue is that if you have a parallel system of justice like Sharia courts, what you could do as a man, which I sent you a link, there's a man in Jordan who got a divorce, and he was Greek Orthodox, and he converted to Islam. He went to Sharia court, and he stopped the divorce rape action in its tracks. And there was nothing she could do about it. When I talked about this, there were some people talking about it a little bit in Copenhagen. Not many people in Iceland deal with this immigration problem because they won't let them in. And it's wildly expensive in Iceland. I mean, a tank of gas is $150. You know, if you go to Subway, it's like $30 for one person. But what's happening is that in Sweden, and I haven't seen a case in the UK yet because I probably haven't read enough, is that what you could do is basically, she's thinking about getting a divorce. It's time to convert to Islam and time to make that happen. And so what happens is that it bypasses the civil code court because the Sharia courts are more important. And you ask yourself, why do you have Sharia courts in these countries? Well, if you don't have Sharia courts, the thought is that they're going to do it anyway. So you might as well let them have Sharia courts so it's in daylight. And that's the real issue.
I think it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I look at the Sharia courts and I look at the way things are going. And I just read an article the other day, for example, not to change the subject too much, but I think it's important and it's related, is that in the United Kingdom, 90% of immigrant crime, specifically crime by Muslim immigrants, is not prosecuted. And it's not that they're not even being.
It has to perceive racism, right? And so what they'll say in the news is Asian gangs. They're not saying that what are you saying?
Well, but here's the thing. Here's the thing that's disturbing about it. So, like in the United States, for example, right? Let's just talk about domestic violence. So, in many cases, 40% of people who accused of domestic violence in the United States, they're arrested. Of that 40% that are arrested, who were accused, in other words, there's enough evidence for it after a police investigation to arrest, that group gets prosecuted. Approximately 70% of that group gets prosecuted for domestic violence criminally. Now, of that group, approximately 6 to 8% get convicted because we really don't have a domestic violence problem in the United States. Now, when you contrast that with the United Kingdom, with Sweden, with parts of Europe, what's happening is that the crimes are being reported. The police are refusing to investigate. No arrests are being made. Therefore, there's no prosecution or anything else. It is, and you're right, it is this idea of perceived racism. It's this idea of, we have to be racially sensitive to these types of things. But I think, at least in the UK now, what we're seeing is we're seeing these Muslim immigrants, they're electing their own people to office. I mean, Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London, and he is absolutely looking the other way. While his brethren,
he honestly believes that we have to deal with that. So if you believe in multiculturalism and how wonderful multiculturalism is, I guess beheadings and child rape and explosions and the whole shebang are the price you pay. That's the price you pay for it. Because the real question people start asking in Europe now is, like in Germany, the common phrase for refugees is rape-ugees. The real common question is Islam compatible with the West, right? It has no freedom of speech. It has no freedom of press. The Charlie Hebdo thing was a real wake-up call for most people. And when you look at the polls for France, I think 63% of people in France believe Islam is not compatible. Here's the other really hard question, is that in Germany, I think there are roughly 7 to 8 million mating males, meaning 18 to 35-ish.
Right.
You're importing roughly 700,000 to 800,000 immigrant males every year. So what's going to happen when those men reach 50% of the mating pool or 100% of the mating pool? I'm not trying to be difficult here. But the other question is that since women are hypergamous, right, and they only want to go up, what's going to happen to all these women with all these men? So I believe one of the real issues of why you have so many rapes going on is that these women are not considering these men for mateable material, which they're not.
Well,
and
let me
desperately poor. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. And let me kind of underscore a couple things here too. I mean, this is not a situation, and I don't believe you're doing this, and I want to clarify for our audience. We're not discussing this from a level of these people are Middle Eastern and we're being discriminatory or we hate Islam or anything like that. What this is about is this is about keeping the focus where it should be, which is rape is bad. I mean, let's just be real. Rape is bad. Child abuse is bad. Child rape is the worst rape out there. Gang child rape is completely inappropriate and completely unacceptable. And we have one particular demographic who does this. And the particular demographic, and again, not all, I want to make sure I got that out there.
It's not all. It's not most,
but Sweden now, after decades of child rape, I think it's either Sweden or the UK.
Sweden has the highest per capita rape on the planet.
I know.
That means war-torn Congo has less rape than Sweden per capita.
Right.
That should be very, very telling.
Right. And I think, but the other side of it is that, in the point that I was trying to get to, is that when you're talking about rape and sexual assault, you have these feminists that are raging about it. They're like, this is the feminist thing. This is that, consent is important.
Well, it's rape culture. It's rape culture, right?
Right.
It's very interesting, right?
Well, hear me out. Let me finish my point real quick. So my point is that at the end of the day, why are we not studying which groups are more likely to commit rape? That's a kind of a rhetorical question here. That's like a Scooby-Doo mystery. Because, again, they're saying, well, rape is a crime committed by a majority of men. Not in the United States, it's not, but it is in Europe primarily because these men are coming from countries that allow these sorts of things. And here's the other thing too. The other piece of this is that I'm sure that these Islamic men are kind, nice and peaceful men to other devout Muslims who follow Sharia law. The crimes, the primary victims of crime when it comes to this particular demographic are those outside their religion. They're considered fair game. They're considered the infidel. And I forget there's another term for it. I forget what the name is.
You have to read the hadith. Yeah, exactly.
But my point, So at the end of the day, we're not talking about a particular group beyond the fact that the verifiable facts and the observable realities show us that this particular group commits the vast majority of these crimes in the United Kingdom, in the UK, in Australia, in Europe, and in these particular areas. Well, and this has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with conduct.
Well, yes, it has to do with conduct. So the issue is that 20 years ago, you never heard the concept of rape culture. So what are the two things that coincide together, right? Mass migration, and all of a sudden, the last 8-7 years, you're things like rape culture. Are the two related? Right. I'm thinking so, right? I'm thinking so in a major way.
Right.
And that's the real hard. That's the super hard. But the other issue is that why is there, according to Murray, why is there a slow death in Europe, right? Well, there's a theory that the West has run out or Europe has gotten tired and this and that. No. Okay. Oh, we had no culture. Are you kidding me? The culture of Einstein and Da Vinci. I mean, seriously. I mean, really think about that for a minute. Why has Europe imploded? I'll tell you exactly why. So I was in Iceland in the middle of nowhere, right? In this house, I was having a conversation with a 65 or 70-year-old Englishman. And I said, have you read this book? Have you talked about it? I've lived in England for several years. And he said, well, we don't have anybody to run the shop. So, I live in a small town. We don't have anybody to run the pub. So we get immigrants to do it. And I go, it's interesting. I'm a Norman. I can trace back to 1066, right? I can totally trace that back to my lineage. And that represented a 5% change, a 5% change in England, okay? You get a 5% change almost every few years. I mean, quite literally.
Right.
But it really boils down to, it's almost like the African-American culture. I'm interviewing a woman, a philosopher woman, PhD, who's African-American next week. And which her big message is, really simply, is that with 300 years of slavery, Jim Crow, lynchings, etc., couldn't break apart the African family. You know what it did? Mailbox money, socialism.
Yep.
Well, in that same way, that's exactly what Europe's doing. And so I talked to him about it. I said, look, here's the bottom line. What's going to happen to your children and grandchildren, right? How are they going to make a go of it? Oh, it's going to be very hard for them, I think. Very, very hard. I'm like, so let me ask you a question. Since 1066, this grand English culture, of which I'm descended upon, I'm also descended from Scandinavian culture as well, is that it all comes to an end because of mailbox money, because of the extremely high taxes. So if you look at the tax rates, okay, so essentially before the Trump's tax changes, okay, these are my Economist numbers. I read the Economist. Sure. I just haven't kept up in the last year because I've been really, really busy.
That's okay. There'll be a test later.
Rate, yeah. The average tax rate in the U.S. is like 0.26%, meaning your income taxes, your sales taxes, your car taxes, whatever taxes you pay, roughly 26% of the average citizen pays that much money. So for every dollar you make, you pay 26 cents. Well, in places like Denmark and things like that, you're paying 49 cents to 50 cents. But if you're a higher earner, you're going to be paying 70% of your taxes. So that means 70 cents of every dollar goes to the government, right?
Right.
Why does that happen? Why? So you can give people free money. If you know anything about game theory and things like that, when you read game theory, you have a free riding principle. That's a big one. Right. I mean, there's a huge free riding principle in Europe. It's wild. So what this old man was saying is, well, it's okay. I don't really care about my children or grandchildren or great grandchildren. And we have 1,000 years of English tradition, but fuck them because I want my mailbox money for £2,000 or £3,000 a month because I'm a pensioner. And never mind when every time we try to raise the age to 70 or 80 years old, we get voted out of office. So France tried to change it from 60 to 62. They did. And then the next year they changed it back to 60. Can you imagine the average woman in Western Europe lives to 91 years old?
Right.
That's 30 years on the dole. A third of your life, you're going to be getting a fortune of money. And you wonder why things are dying. So here's why things are dying in Europe. I'll break it down really quickly. If you go and look at statistics and what an average couple wants to have for children, most women and couples want to have 2 children. The question is they can't afford them. So you're caught in this catch-22. You have very high taxes. You have a high cost of living. But why their high cost of living? Well, A, you have high taxes. B, you're in a big city. But C, you start importing a ton of people, right?
Well, so you have all that dead wood.
You have all that dead wood coming in. But as those people come in, you're like, well, these people are going to work. They're going to clean our toilets. They're going to build our roads. They're going to make everything happen. Well, what happens to most of these refugees is they send a quarter to half their money out the door, and they live in hovels. Not really hovels, but they'll live in they'll live in a flat, in a park.
Sure. They do what the Latinos
4 or 5
do.
people in one.
Yeah, they do what the Latino guys do.
Throw money back home, right?
Right.
And that's the bargain you're paying. But for every one person you're bringing in, you're forgetting about all the tube expansions in London. There's a huge tube expansion that costs a fortune. All these major infrastructure projects, right? So when you look at the data, what really happens is that all the statistics point and say, look, these immigrants are costing us more than what they're bringing in. And they're not, and the problem is a lot of them are not assimilating. I think the sub-Saharan ones do assimilate because they have a Christian base, but the Islamic ones do not assimilate. They're basically building parallel courts.
But here's the other, but here's
everything else. But
right.
Hold on, one more
Go
thing.
ahead.
As you bring these people in, you have these super high taxes to pay your old people, right?
Right.
And you bring them in, and all these homes cost so much more because supply and demand.
Right.
So the very thing you want them to do, so I think Germany has a 1.8 replacement level. Portugal has a 1.2% replacement level. So the very thing you want them to do is to have children to have more to keep your culture going. And the very thing you're doing is another issue is that for Social Security and things like that, they say it's a big reason why people don't have more than 1 or 2 or 3 children at all anymore. So You basically poison pilled yourself. And what is socialism? Socialism is feminism, dude. But let's break it all out. Right? Because 80% of taxpayers are men and 80% of people on the dole are women. Let's break that out really quickly. It has to do with male disposability. And this dude back in Iceland I was talking to, this Englishman, he's like, oh man, I never thought about that. I go, yeah, exactly. Now, are you ready to give up your mailbox money? No.
Well,
anyway, sorry.
No. And I think you make some valid points, and let me kind of touch on those too as well. So one of the things that people have realized too is, so like if you look at the Latinos that come in from South America, and I'm talking about the legal immigrants, not the illegal immigrants, they will go in and they'll put 4 guys in a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 guys per room. They will minimize their expenses, and then they will send that money back to their family. I mean, which is something that American men used to do back during the Great Depression. They'd have their family would live in one place, and the fathers and the husbands would go around and they would travel around to find work. I mean, that's just what they did. But what's interesting about the migration, the mass migration in Europe and in that entire area is that the majority of those men who come into those countries, they're not working. They're not looking for work. They are looking for free money. In fact, if you look at the
the entire point. That's the entire point.
Right. So, and I think that what's probably happening is the same thing that's happening in Central America. And that is people are going into these countries. They are going into Syria. They are going into Iraq. They are going into Afghanistan. They are going into all these sub-Saharan African countries, and they are advertising to come to Europe. Then they get up and
who's doing that? Guess who's doing
that? It's the NGOs.
George Soros.
Right.
Soros. I kid you not.
And he's admitted it. He's admitted it.
Yeah. They go and they have these pamphlets that say, these are your 3 or 4 routes into Europe. And this is what you do. All you have to do is make it onto a boat and they'll pick your ass up and take you.
Oh no! I'll put money. Oh, well, hold on. Let me take it a step further, because I have evidence of this, and I made a video about this. I will put money on it that they are actually providing the transportation to whatever country they're going to Libya, where I already know, and they've already done news stories about this, dozens of places, where what's happening is that the human smugglers in Libya, in northern Africa, they put these guys on boats with a transponder. The NGO is prearranged to meet this Libyan boat, or whatever boat it's, whatever country the boat is. They will pick up these NGO people and they will taxi them to the southern portion of Italy. And shoot them out all over Europe. So my guess is, now the reason I think that this is happening and this pipeline is happening, and you have people like Soros paying for it, is because Soros and a lot of his people are directly linked to the mass migration from Central America to the United States. I already know that they're taking out ads in local newspapers saying, come to the United States. They're going out and they're doing outreach, and they're telling the people down there, look, go ahead and go to the United States. It's better. Don't listen to the rhetoric out there. Trust me, they'll let you in. I have people, they're going and they're saying, look, bring somebody's kid with you and say it's yours, and that will lock you in. Then once these people get to the United States, they're illegally shooting them over the wall or through the river or whatever. And the women that come in, the illegal immigrant women mothers come in, they go out of their way. Yeah, but the goal, right. But the goal is to get pregnant, to have an anchor baby.
The anchor baby. Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Well, here's the issue is, why are they doing this? I'll give you the grand secret. So Labour in the UK, et cetera, they all give these really low numbers for immigration. And then every single one, including Merkel, they all explode. It's all way higher than they ever anticipated, right? Because governments always get these things right. Here's why they're doing it. If you have a socialist left-leaning government, okay, how do you get more voters in a democracy? You can read a book called The Dictator's Handbook. It talks all about how to do this. It's amazing. It's a great book. Pick it up. It's a great book. So in a democracy, all you need is one person, one vote. So if you bring in a bunch of poor people from the third world, they're dirt poor, how are they going to vote? They're going to vote Democratic. They're going to vote for Labor. They're going to vote for socialism. They're going to vote for the Democratic Christians in Germany, et cetera.
Yeah, they're going to vote for free shit.
This is how you import voters. And the politicians don't care. They only care about themselves individually. And they use this concept of multiculturalism to push it. That's the great secret. And it's interesting, for Europe has been so left-leaning for so long, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? So you have the French Revolution and the whole bit, and the terror in France, and you can watch Les Miserables, read the book, etc. Or you have all this terribleness in Europe in the early mid 20th century, right? And so they all decided to go super socialism, and we're going to save everybody. But that has a consequence to that. There's a drastic consequence to that. The consequence of left-leaning, giving free money out to people, what it basically does is it moves the incentive to work. When you travel into Italy, here's the great funny thing, is that if you know anything about French, how job systems work in Europe and in Western Europe, what happens is that in order to get full employment, what they'll do is they'll have jobs banks and things like that, and they'll say, oh, John, you can only work half-time, and Betty, you can only work half-time. And they'll meter out all these jobs to part-time jobs. And so what ends up happening is that if you're in your 20s and 30s, it's nearly impossible to get a job. But guess who gets a job? Guess who gets a job?
The migrants.
All the migrants get a job. They leapfrog the entire goddamn system. So if you're an old dude and you're 65 or 70 years old, your children and grandchildren can't get jobs. And it's this grand pyramid scheme.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a grand pyramid scheme. We have to pay for these old people. We have to pay for them. How are we going to pay for them? We'll bring in migrants and have super cheap labor, and they'll increase the pie and make it all happen. And by the way, your own children and grandchildren can't get work at all. And then we'll have the migrants take their jobs.
Right.
And that's even worse. It's so sad. It's hilarious.
Well, they're doing this.
Places like Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing this in Canada and they're doing this in the United States as well. In fact, that's why you see all these, like the feminists and the social justice warriors, they are pushing for diversity vice presidents and diversity compliance officers and all this other bullshit, because they want these people in HR to go, no, you don't have enough illegal immigrants as employees.
They don't have a meritocracy.
Right.
The enemy of socialism
before you jump over real quick. Right. And before you jump over a little bit, I also want to confirm what you said about importing voters. So in San Francisco right now, today, the San Francisco local municipal government, I don't know if it was at the county level or at the city level. However, it is confirmed, and this is in the mainstream media, that those governments are allowing illegal immigrants to vote. Every one of those officials that voted that, every one of those fuckers should be tried for treason, because our right to vote.
They say one of the reasons why they want to have a person with a driver's license, an illegal a migrant to get a driver's license, is so they can walk into a voting booth.
Right. And I think that, and so the issue that I see is that, there should be a national ID, and it should say that you are a citizen. I mean, I know that like CDL truck drivers have to prove their citizenship because, again, of the large amount of illegal immigrants that are there. But I think that it's important that people understand that when it comes to this whole idea of importing socialist voters who just want free shit, everything that you're saying here is confirmed by the mainstream media. And so I want people, I understand that, like, for people who might be new to this particular subject or this particular content, that this might seem like conspiracy theory, or it might seem like it's hyperbolic or anything else. This is stuff that is grounded in
the socialism and free shit boil into that. It boils into divorce rate culture.
Right.
Nothing's better than free. Nothing is better than free.
Right.
Nothing.
Well,
the other issue is that they say build the wall, build the wall. The issue is that Republicans have it wrong. They're selling it wrong. I have property in Texas, and for 30 and 40 years we deal with the trash that comes across and everything else, and the violence that comes associated with that. What they don't say is, well, the coyotes rape the women, they hang the panties on these trees. That also happens to sub-Saharan women that come across through Libya or Morocco. And by the way, they'll rape your 10-year-old girl, your 15-year-old girl, and they'll telex back, they'll take a phone call back to Nigeria or wherever it is and say, you need to give us more than $2,000 or she's not going to make it out alive. And they promise jobs in Europe or this and that. And the jobs they have in Europe are not to be a server or a waitress somewhere. It's to be a prostitute. And so that's what you're asking for. But for the wall is really simple. You want people literally dying to cross over? You want all this plastic garbage to be pushed all across the southwest of America? No, it's an environmental hazard. These same left people that are so pro-immigration don't seem to care at all. You have plastic banned, for straws and bags and things like that, but there's no concept that this is an environmental nightmare. None of that. The issue is that for Howard of Australia, he commented on Europe's problem, and he said the problem is that when you let one in, more will come. And when those more come, even more come, right? So you have 2 to 5 million people in Europe sitting in camps, and more keep coming. At some point, they're going to have to do Australia and say, look, we're not going to allow Indonesians in. We're not going to allow people to land on our shore and then claim asylum. You must claim asylum from your country of origin. What happens in Europe is really simple. You show up, you don't show your fingerprints, and you can go into Germany and go boom, and you're all said and done. I mean, literally. The other big issue for Europe's problem is they want open borders throughout Europe. It's big, and it's a heartfelt thing. They're going to have to stop it, and they're really, really upset about it. Literally, when I was in Bavaria, they're literally putting up borders along the Uber-Salzburg line where you have to stop and look, and they look at your papers and vice versa. I mean, it's really pretty interesting.
Well, I can tell you right now, I mean, they're trying to go into Spain, and I mean, you got these guys rushing the border in Spain. They're illegal immigrants, and they're throwing feces and defecation and everything else at the guards that are there. It is absolutely insane.
But the other issue is that Poland, Hungary, Italy, somewhat Spain. Spain's changing their government, but I mean, getting ready to. But you have a whole concept. It's about the elite versus the working class. Isn't that interesting how Trump got elected? And I'm not pro-Trump. I'm not pro-Hillary. I'm really anti-dynasty. That's a big one. But This last election was about the elites versus the working class. What's going on in Italy right now is that the working class can't get jobs. Why can't the working class get jobs in Italy? Is it globalization? Is it mass migration? Right? There are no jobs.
Well, let's call globalism what it really is. Okay, it's communism. Let's just be real. I mean, that's really what the globalist agenda is. It's communism. And let's talk a bit for a second about this idea about the elites versus the working class. This idea is absolutely a shit show, because most of the people that are leading these socialist movements, pardon me, I had a little bit of feedback. Sorry about that. Most of these people that are leading these socialist movements, they're elites. They're rich. They're extremely financially well off, and then they run around. They pretend to be the working class.
They're limousine liberals, dude. They're limousine liberals. So let's call it what it is. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, and so this idea that they're part of the working class, that's just a fake narrative. I mean, they're as dishonest as everything else about them. It is absolutely insane.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So let me ask you this. So now that you've gotten through this, give me a second here.
That's all good. While you're fussing with that, I'll tell you who I'm interviewing.
Yeah. Technical issues for the lose.
Yeah. I'll talk while you get your stuff together. This week I interview a cop, really fascinating. He's going to talk about how male disposability, how most, basically 95% of cops are men. It's a very highly male disposable field. How it's one of the highest suicide rates. It would, of any profession, it would be the highest if you include the 5 years after they leave the force. Most cops kill themselves as a result, like 90%, from losing their children in a divorce and being destroyed. So imagine you're making $30,000 to $50,000 a year, and you leave the force. Most cops don't have to have a college education, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they leave the force, they have a very hard time getting a job, and therefore the child support never gets paid, and they kill themselves. You get 4 days a month, kind of thing like that. I have another story that talks about, I have a woman from Atlanta. She's an African-American woman. She's a PhD in philosophy, and she's very interesting. She said, Michael, do you know why women get so excited about a marriage, getting married? It's because they never have to work again.
Right.
Or not really work again, but they have a guarantee in life. They have a guarantee through the courts, or they guarantee to pick up their feet. And that's when women get so excited. And the other thing she said was really telling. She's a Christian, and she said, it's interesting that people don't see this and can't see it. When you look at the Bible, you have this whole concept of in the Gospels, you have this bridegroom concept. And in the bridegroom concept of Christianity, it's the bridegroom is God kind of thing, or Jesus, whatever. And the bride is not very important. It's the bridegroom. It's the man. And you think about this male disposability, we're told that men are nothing and we throw them away. But the reality is that men make everything. I bet this chair, the carpet, everything you see around in society is built by men, right?
Right.
And what she talks about to me is that women use men on such an epic level that nobody can see it. It's so common. And so what she talks about is that of the lower half, the people that make the lower 50% of income, the lower 50% of income, what she's talking about is, sorry, dog, 1 second. What she's talking about is these women are going to have 2 children or 3 children. So you're paying the lower half, the ones that aren't very good at raising children, stable environments. Not all.
Right.
Not all. Okay. But what you have is these single homes. You have this multi-generational 15-year-olds having 15-year-olds having 15-year-olds, et cetera. Because the intact family marriage rate, I think, was 6% in 1960. Now it's 51%. As far as 6% didn't have children. Weren't married in 1960. They had children. Now 51% across the board. And so I'm taking a little too long to explain this. But for her, what she's saying is that once these women lose their breadwinning children, the word on the street is this. It's not, oh, I need to go get work and I need to go, get a job or go back to school and make all this happen. No. You know what they say? I got to go find myself a new baby daddy.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That is not telling enough for you. And this is not, oh, this is the one bad chick. This is half. at least half are thinking this.
Well, you see this all, I
least.
mean, you see this all the time on Facebook and social media, where what'll happen is that these women are like, oh, I need more money, so I need to go find another rich man to marry, and then they divorce, and then they dump him. That's why you see like there's like these rich women who are like in their 50s and 60s, right? And they are loaded. Some of them are millionaires. And you're like, how did you become a millionaire? And they're like, oh, I married and divorced 3 rich men, and now I'm a millionaire.
You know the funny story about that? My best friend in college has a, well, I'm not going to out him or anything like that, but basically is an accountant. And he's been working in numerous firms throughout what have you.
Sure.
And they can count, I mean, countless women, this is in a different state, but essentially where they're 65 or 70 and they're on their 7th marriage. And when the money runs out, they get married again.
Right.
And they get another $500,000 settlement. But the problem is that in a world where women make more than men now, right? Or hypothetically, right? I mean, like as you're in your 20s, right? As that filters up, there are going to be no more men for you to go after.
Well, and I think that as
so sad.
Yeah, and I think that as MGTOW grows, at best, these women will end up being pump and dumps, and these men will avoid cohabitation because they don't want to get forced into a common law marriage.
Correct.
So I think that when it comes to that kind of thing, I think that it's absolutely crazy. But here's a funny thing. I mean, again, to go back to the original, content when we first started talking today, anybody who's not paying attention to Europe needs to be, because that is a preview of what is, it's what's going to happen to the United States. We see this in Dearborn, Michigan already. We see this in a variety of other areas. I mean, there is an invasion now.
Let me tell you the scary thing. By 2050, there'll be more people that follow Islam than there are Jews. So the funny thing is that for Europe, they're all super, super worried about, well, we need to be multicultural and accepting and not be judgmental or racist or whatever they call it. But the funny thing is that anti-Semitic attacks are up like 1,000%.
Yep.
What's said in mosque is oh damn it. What is the saying in the German mosque? It's oh damn it. It's not Hezbollah. What's the other group in Israel? I forget the saying.
Hamas?
But it's Hamas. All Jews get the gas. I kid you not. That's the saying. And so the funny thing is that by accepting all these migrants in,
that's horrible, right?
They're actually increasing all their anti-Semitic attacks, which is the very reason why they accept the migrants in, right? It's a whole guilt complex,
right? And
so all my friends are Jewish. So I think that if you have not read a book called "The History of the Jews" by I think it's Schumann. It's a great 2-part series. It's really fascinating how integral the Jewish society is into the West. And if you look at statistics, they include Jews now as whites. That's fine. But all my friends are Jewish. And as I grew up, it's interesting. Some of them had this big grand conspiracy theory about how they're for thousands of years they're being persecuted, they're going to come after you, Well, mass migration, I just counted it for 20 years, and now I'm like, oh man, this is not so good if you happen to be Jewish. You really need to start thinking about what's going to happen by 2050 when the majority where Islamic people of origin are going to outnumber Jewish people. What's going to happen to Israel? What's going to happen to all that issue?
Well, I think that that's going to be the big issue is that, in addition to all the other trauma that's there, we're going to see all these Jewish people being wrongfully targeted. Because again, if you look at a lot of the people within the we'll call it the radical Muslim community who are the criminal element within that community, when it comes to victimizing people, they will prioritize victimizing Jewish people over everybody else.
Well, there is that, but here's the issue with that. I think when you ran the polls in the UK, it was, I have to go look. I can pull up my phone and start reading it really quickly. But 51% of Muslims in the UK do not believe that homosexuality is a viable lifestyle. Right.
Right.
What does that tell you? Right. It's not the fringe 2%. This is an inevitability. This is the inevitability, Mr. Anderson. The subway is coming to get you.
That's it.
It's not an if, it's a when.
Right.
Right? If you want to teach gay people, to fly off of buildings, bring them in. Bring them in. Right? Oh, here's my favorite story in the book of The Strange Death of Europe, is that this big clerk came and talked to the Pope in like 98, 99. And what he said was, really simply, we're invading. And if we can't win by physical force, which we can't, we're going to win by the wombs of our women. Right. And the other issue, so here's the fascinating part about...
Let me interject something real quick about that. So it's interesting you said that, because I know that, like 5-6 years ago, when I was doing some reporting on the Ukrainian coup in 2014, I remember watching, and just in part of that research, I remember watching the migrants then. They were marching down the street in protest, and they were saying, we are going to conquer you through the wombs of your women. We are going to rape your women, and we are going to do these things. And the thing that's crazy about it, to kind of touch on the other point you made, is that you have these people in the LGBT community who are absolutely pro-Islamic. And I think that's great that they're tolerant. But the problem is that the reverse is not true. And these people, there was an event, I think it was 6 months ago, and I could be wrong a little bit on my timeline, but there was an event where these LGBT groups were like, they were doing like a pro-Islamic march, and the Muslims came and attacked them. And it was like, do you not see the reality on the ground? You are basically supporting the people who want to kill you. And that's the thing, is
right. And here's why. So if you think about it, for Nietzsche, you're either going to have nihilism, which basically it's in the Big Lebowski or something like that, or read Kafka. It's a belief in nothing and an abandonment of nothing, and nothing. Everything has meaning. It loses its meaning the steak has no taste, et cetera, et cetera. So so you either have that, or you have a move to fascism because you've removed this concept of God, right? And so what ends up happening is that for the far left or for LGBT communities, they have a loss of identity in themselves. And so what happens, if you know much about psychology, is that you have self-sabotage that goes on in people. Right. If you don't catch it, it can ruin your life. So what happens is that life is really wonderful right now, right? Things are easier, the best they have been in human history by far. So what do? You self-sabotage that. You actually bring in the group that actually are the seeds of your own destruction. It's really, really interesting. As a man going your own way, man, it's very compelling to think about converting to Islam, because you're going to get your kids in Islam. You can have a thing called a nikah, which is a really fascinating concept. I forgot if I talked about this. But what the nikah does is it's a premarital contract that holds water, including your children. You can include everything in a nikah. And so all you have to do is go to a place that recognizes Sharia court, convert to Islam, have a nikah that says, hey, this is my exit cost. Because if the West won't give me an exit cost, and the West won't give me my children, become Islamic. You're going to get your children. And if they don't recognize a nikah, then they're Islamophobic, right? They're not multicultural. That's the issue. And so there are a lot of bads that come with Islam, don't get me wrong. Right. But if you just want your kids and you don't want the divorce rate, this may be the only way to go. I'm just saying, right?
Right. Well, and to kind of bring this back full circle, and then we'll jump into Q&A. I think that it's important for people to realize that, a lot of it's like Michael said, people are bringing this idea of their own destruction to the forefront, and they are self-sabotaging. And we see this. I mean, we were told about this by Yuri Bezimov back in 1984, and he was one of the head propagandists for the Russian KGB, where he said, look, we're going to try to export social justice, and then we're going to get all these idiots to do our bidding for us, and then once they're done and they've done everything, we're going to line them up against the wall and we're going to put a bullet in their head. And we're seeing something very similar right now with the social justice movement. And again, I'm not just discussing the LGBT community. I'm not just discussing the feminist community. I'm discussing all of it on the left, because the left is not, they are no longer democratic, and they aren't even socialist. They are pushing for hard communism. Now, they are calling themselves socialists because it is a more sanitary term, but this is communism, and they're doing it, and they're trying to create this astroturf grassroots movement of people who are heavily funded and heavily supported by these financial powerhouses that are global communists like George Soros and people like that. And then you have the globalists at the top who in effect are really communists. Nobody supports the free market. These people don't support democratic values. They are absolutely opposed to meritocracy. They are absolutely opposed to accountability of any kind. And so I think that these issues are important, especially for a man going his own way, because men getting divorce raped was the canary in the coal mine.
Yes.
When the family
African American men are the canary, man. They are unbelievable.
Absolutely. Well,
I mean,
yeah, and let's touch on that real quick for a second. If you look at the civil rights movement, and it's like what you said earlier in the broadcast. You said, there was a woman who said, look, 400 years of slavery didn't destroy the African-American family. Jim Crow laws didn't destroy the African-American family.
Money did, baby.
Yeah, it was welfare. Money. Yeah, it was welfare. And if you look at the communities, you look at old video footage of Martin Luther King and you look at Malcolm X and everybody else, they all had families. They all had children. Yes. They were all wearing slacks and ties. Their neighborhoods were clean. Their homes were intact. Everything's there. Then you fast forward today, and now you have these lawless ghettos. And they're everywhere.
And they're all products of single women.
Correct.
I mean, here's the other issue is that the poverty rate for African-American culture from 1945 was 40%. I mean, 4 out of 10 African-Americans were poor. By 1960, it dropped to 20%.
Right.
Now we're back up in the mid-30s. So the war on poverty generated poverty. But here's the big issue that no one sees. So if you're an American, you're in your own little goddamn bubble. Okay, excuse my language, but I'm just going to say it. You're in your own goddamn bubble. Here's why. The average person on the poverty line, which is 26 to 28,000, it moves because of inflation, has a higher standard of living.
Yep.
Has a higher standard of living than the upper middle class in Western Europe, in France, in UK, in Germany, etc. So poverty is relative. And if you don't believe me, look it up. Okay? It has to do with your average living space, etc., etc. There's also a big lie from the left, and Bernie Sanders left, which really gets me going, is this whole concept that we're poorer than we were in 1970. Okay, or we haven't gone anywhere. So that's an interesting concept, right? So in 1970, the average, so inflation adjusted, the average family was a family of 5. That was 3 kids. The average family was 55,000. So 5 at 55,000. Okay, that was roughly 72 or 3%. Okay, and the average family that made over $100,000 of the upper class was 8% of the population. And Bernie Sanders goes and says, hey, the middle class is shrinking. It's shrinking, y'all. We're being outpoured to China. Everything's going terrible. Here's the secret to that. Today, in 2014, the average middle class, okay, family of 4, it's family of 4 now, who made 55,000 was half the population. So it's gone from 73% to 50%. Where'd they all go? Lower class, right? And to the bottom? No. The average family of 4 that makes over $100,000 is 24% of the population.
Right.
So meritocracy and the American dream of pushing up, in spite of all the triangle trade, in spite of single families, in spite of all that, it's actually working. But you know what their answer is? We should increase taxes to become more like Europe. I think we should become more like Europe. Yes, I think 70% of my money needs to go to the government, because we all know the government has so much better responsibility for money than I myself. So the bargain you have as an American is you go, okay, we spend 26% of our money on taxes. Europe spends roughly half. Go to Europe. Go to a grocery store. See how amazing the grocery stores are. They're terrible. Walk in any grocery store in the United States, and they're amazing. It has to do with meritocracy and open market and free markets.
Right.
For Europe, no. These people are not. They're not good. So when I was a boy, I went to Europe, and they said the heyday was 1988. The average standard of Europe, like France, UK, etc., has literally halved since 88 to basically 2010. Now it's due to half again by 2030, and by 2050 it's going to half again. Why is that? It has to do with socialism, which is basically feminism, which is mailbox money and migrants and washing you away. They say that the average 15-year-old in Austria will not be that the average Austrian will not see the majority of their countrymen be Austrians by the time they die. 40% of people in Switzerland will be Muslim by 2100.
Well, they're even saying now that like Sweden will just be Sweden in name only, but the country will be dead as far as the culture. Right.
Yeah. But the fascinating thing is that, so here's the secret about Islam, is that it's really hard to commit divorce rape when you have 6 wives, right?
Right.
But here's the other secret. So the man comes in, and they basically it's not called chain migration in Europe, but basically you're there. It's too emotional to remove them. They'll bring in 6 people, 6 women. Not all, but a lot do. And so what happens is that you'll have 1 wife, and the other 4 or 5 will all be single moms on the government dole. So Europe actually pays these people to come in to create parallel systems and to pump out children. That's the secret that nobody wants to talk about because it's somehow racial. I'm like, no, and they call them Asians. You need to be real and call what this is. This is an invasion. Islam is about submission. They'll either do it by the sword or do it by the womb, and that's the reality of it. Well,
and again, to close before we jump into Q&A, here's the thing: it's not about the race; it's about the conduct. It's about what they're doing, not what they look like. And again, it's completely this is a crime everywhere else in the civilized world. Rape is a crime. Fraud is a crime. These are crimes. And anybody who wants to rephrase it otherwise, all they're doing is disingenuously reframing it in an effort to conceal their complicity to these crimes. And the sad part about it, and also in closing as well, to really kind of bring this home, in Sweden, to give you an example of how dysfunctional things are, and this is kind of similar in other parts of Europe, the other day, a family was sitting in their home and a hand grenade was tossed through their window. Now, the Swedish government, when the police arrived to investigate this particular crime, they had to look at the hand grenade. Do you know why? They had to determine whether or not the hand grenade was live or it was a fake hand grenade. Now, if it was live, the person who threw it would have gotten charged with attempted murder. If the hand grenade was just a fake hand grenade, then they would have gotten charged with vandalism. But in neither case,
only vandalism.
Yeah. But in neither case, could the person who threw the hand grenade be charged with terrorism? So that should kind of give you everything you need to know about how complicit these feminist socialist governments are when it comes to the victimization of their own people. So with that said, Michael Combs, thank you again for taking the time out today. I know we kind of had a false start a little bit last week. I appreciate your patience.
I want to tell you one more thing.
Go
I have
for
this
it.
one
Go
last
for
thing.
it.
Sorry. I need to do another man. So I talked about the child support hustle.
Yeah.
So basically, if a man makes 40 and she makes 40, basically you're end up in an 80-20. She's going to walk away take home money after taxes and after paying health insurance. She's going to walk away with about $3,600 to $4,000 a month. He's going to walk out under $1,000. I also talked about doctors, right? Guess what I have coming this week? I have a pediatrician that makes $300,000 a year. And guess what his take-home money is every month after taxes? $789. Why? Oh, well, she can't work. I asked him, dude, did she go to college? Did she choose to have these children? Well, let me guess. If she didn't get to stay at home, she was going to make your relationship unstable and she was going to threaten to leave, right? So therefore, she didn't want to work. She blackmailed you not to work. And then when she did inevitably leave you, because 9 out of 10 she did, she's going to leave you. She's going to be an initiator. Then the family court's going to give her 82% of all your stuff and most of your money, right?
And there it is.
Just epic.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's crazy. All right, so Wolf and Rose, talk to me about the questions. What questions do we have? Let's go ahead and hit those. Oh, and before you jump into the questions, let me say one other thing too. On the upper right hand side, or I should say the lower right hand side of your screen, if you are on Twitch TV or you're on a desktop, whether it be a Mac or a PC, you will see occasionally, you should see occasionally, a Bukkake choke slam floating up. You can redeem those by hovering over the lower right hand side of the screen. With a question mark, you click those, you can redeem those to ask questions, or you can type your question in the chat, and those questions will be addressed. Please do not ask multi-part questions. Please do not pontificate before the questions, because there are character limits to each chat question, as well as the Bukkake chokeslam questions. And please try to, be respectful of everybody else and try to avoid potato questions where possible. With that said, Wolf, where are we at? And Rose?
Okay, great. All right. The first one is from The Plumber Speaks. It is a question for Mr. Combs. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Craig Childress?
Yes, I've been trying to get him in to interview him. He's really big into parental alienation. There's a big fight in the parental alienation community right now. There's a book. Here we go. This is Divorce Poison. So for those of you who don't know, this book is being introduced into evidence. I'll just pull it. So Divorce Poison talks about parental alienation, and this is written by the Warsack guy who lives in Dallas. The problem is he wants like 10 grand to have a freaking conversation. The problem in courts is that parental alienator, according to Warren Farrell in the Boyd Crisis, basically for every 5 women that commit PA, 1 man will commit it. They're more prone to doing it. So what happens in court is that they'll get a difficult woman that gets in there, and she's fed by the court in the feminist system, right? And what happens is that they go, okay, this is out of control. You have all this kind of stuff going on. This is really bad for the children. So we're gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we're gonna give those kids to the woman, and we're gonna push that man away, and we're gonna give him supervised visits. And we're going to use a guardian ad litem to manipulate this whole situation to call him a bad parent and blah, 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 blah. She's the one that's bad-mouthing the children and they're committing all these life outcomes. So what Warsack says is that actually the very worst thing you can actually do is to give the children to a parental alienator. So one of the big arguments for a 50-50 is that for children is that it's really hard for parental alienation to continue into perpetuity when you're on a 50-50. Others believe that what you should be doing is removing the children from the parental alienator and giving them to the father. The interesting thing on life outcomes is that technically that intact families have the highest outcome rate for children, and then slightly less are 50-50 maximum parental involvement, and the worst life outcome is single moms or single moms are divorced, worst life outcome, like really, really bad, right? Just Google it. Well, interestingly enough, you know what the highest life outcome is? Single men that are divorced. They have the highest life outcome in their children. Because why is that? Because they're willing to put up with all this crap. They're willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go into to go through this court system, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why. It's like breastfed babies. Breastfed babies have a high life outcome because their parents are willing to sacrifice. Well, in the same way, single men that have been through a divorce court, because 93% of all kids go to women. So it means women have to surrender their children, or they're terrible human beings. And the reason why those life outcomes for single men, the divorced men for their children are so high, is those men love their children more than themselves, and they're going to do anything for their kids.
And here I thought that breastfed babies had a higher life outcome because tits are important.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now, Wolf, exactly. Your microphone is...
But for children, I'm trying to get children. It's been a back.
That is not me. I'm on mute.
Very familiar with them.
Actually, I was going to discuss your volume, Wolf. It's extremely high.
Oh, okay.
Maybe if you could drop it by about 10 or 15%, that'd be fantastic.
All right, stand by.
Thank you. All right, Rose, are you in a position to ask the next question? Yes, no, maybe not. Yeah, Rose has this.
She's having anxiety issues.
Oh, well, life happens. All right, let's go ahead with the next question.
All right. Question for DDJ. In yesterday's TFM show, a guest mentioned his child support is determined by his health insurance. Can you explain what the relationship between child support and health insurance is?
I mean, in a layman's perspective, yeah. So when he said that, I'm very skeptical by it. And I say that because, like, I have never seen a prosecutor go in there and go, hey, we're going to go after you for back child support. And the guy goes, no, I have all this money in a health savings account, and I'm going to use that as evidence going in there.
I know about that.
Right. So I'm like, because here's the thing. When you do child support, when they do child support in the United States is based on a worksheet, and the worksheet is based on the expenses that the child is going to incur. So they determine that. So they add the mother's income, they add the father's income together. They say, okay, now let's say dad makes, in this case, mom was making more than him and he was making close to what she was making. So for purposes of this conversation, he's making 40%, she's making 60% for an example. Okay. So with that said, what'll happen is that they'll take his portion of the child support, her portion of the child support, and they'll say, okay, this is the total amount of the child should deserve for support. Dad's responsible for 40% of that. Mom's responsible for 60% of that. But because the child is living with mom, dad pays mom the 40% rather than mom paying it, because, she's not going to pay it to herself. Well, when it comes to health insurance, it used to be that you would pay his 40% of the health insurance, mom would pay 60. But what they're starting to do is they're starting to say, okay, well, mom has to carry health insurance, dad has to carry health insurance, the children have to be added to both, and then one health insurance plan is primary, the other one is secondary. Usually it's the better of the two plans, and then you use the secondary plan as your stopgap when it comes to the payment of the health insurance. Now, in this case, the guy last night had a health savings plan that he was dumping money into, and so he was trying to make the argument, because I was putting those dollars in the health savings plan, that should be where it should be. The other side of it is that he was also paying for his kids' private school as well. So, yeah. So,
I'm sorry.
Right. So, and mom wasn't contributing to either one of those things.
Correct.
So what ends up happening is, at the end of the day, my guess is what the prosecutor did is they said, okay, well, we'll take a look at those dollars, and we will go ahead and see that he's actually paying more child support than less. So that's why they're not going after him.
I'll tell you exactly why. So it's called the income shares model, right? So there are three different, there's a Nelson model, the income shares model, et cetera.
Right.
In about 33 states, I can't remember exactly the number right now, is the income shares model. So what happens is that what a health savings account is say you make $100,000 a year and you're allowed like $66,000, $6,500 it goes up. Let's say you put $5,000 in your HSA. And that allows you to spend money, and your health plan is different for that. And so what happens is, instead of being taxed on 100, you're now taxed on 95, because that $5,000 is tax free. And so what they'll say in the court is that because your expenses are decreased because you're using an HSA plan, you therefore owe more money to her on that income shares model, and that's kind of what happens. The funny thing is that you need to make sure, if you're thinking about, if things are rocking your marriage, you need to get your kids out of private school, period. I did this 2 years before my marriage ended. It was deliberate. I pulled them out. I put them into public school on purpose, because I would therefore be responsible for any children I had two, for both kids to have $25,000 or $30,000 a year of private school until they're 18. So instead of being hit with, like, the average child support for a middle class man is $2,000, which is roughly $500,000, I'd be out another $500,000 to $800,000, because you also remember, in 10 years from now, private school is not going to be $25,000, it's 30 or 35. So you really need to think about getting your kids out of private school.
Right.
Period.
Well, so in this guy's case, he was saying that the prosecutor wasn't going after him for child support. But here's the problem, because his medical
bag of money there.
Yeah. His big thing was all of his medical insurance was just an HSA. He had like a high contribution HSA,
Yes,
and he was throwing money in there. So I think, and I didn't really have a chance to say this because the conversation didn't go there. But the reality is that guy's living on borrowed time. If they go after him, he's done. Because they will look at the HSA not as child support. They will look at it as the medical portion of the child support. They won't look at it as the primary source of the child support. And what they'll do is they'll take his contribution to the child's school and they'll call that a gift. And then again, they'll force him to pay it. And they'll be like, look, you're going to pay the private school no matter what. And then you're going to have to pay child support on top of that. And when they do it, no dinner, no movie, no dessert, no consent. He's fucked.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the next question?
Next question is from Ash Jamai. Does the guest have a YouTube channel?
I do. It's Solzhenitsyn Productions. You have to Google the word Solzhenitsyn. I'm sure I'll put it in the link of the video. Just look for Solzhenitsyn Productions. I have three up, I think, right now. I have one with Melissa Isaac, which is a female lawyer that tells you how it really is. Meaning, if she talks about domestic violence, she talks about being accused of being a pedophile, the whole bit. I mean, she tells you how it really is. I have another one issued by one I put up for Daddy Justice. It's really fascinating. All the ones I'm trying to put up a bunch of statistics. When I mention statistics, I give you works cited in the film. And they're all raw, uncut kind of thing. I mean, they're multi-camera, et cetera.
Well, and the other thing,
Justice. Yeah.
The thing with Melissa Isaac, that is a fantastic video, and anybody who hasn't seen it needs to watch it. And the
you
link,
just share it.
Yeah.
If you have men that are worried about divorces or what have you, and don't believe this doesn't go on, oh boy, you are really in for it. The Daddy Justice thing is a man who fought the system for years and years and years. He was a big job creator, blah, blah, blah. And he just fought it and fought it and fought it, and gives you ideas of how to fight it and why. And if you don't believe this is real, or if you have friends that don't believe that are blue-pilled, right, you need to watch this. I'll have more come online. I'm going to do a trailer in the middle. I have a monster interview coming up at the end of August. I'm going on location again. It's huge. It's a big deal. I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to get sabotaged. I have a huge one. It's going to be multi-day. It's going to be huge. It's like Trump. It's going to be huge. But I'm going to have my first trailer out, I hope, sometime in September, early October.
Now
I put up a couple things that I haven't finished it out yet. So.
You have a GoFundMe as well, don't you? Go ahead and show that out real quick.
It's like Passion Prizes movie, all that. I just haven't gotten together. I have another person that's helping me write a book because I'm trying to explain male disposability, cash and prizes, and the happiness trap, and why it's all broken, and why I have a multi-tiered approach. Men should walk away. You just dry up the men, and women will come in and change the law. You can do MRA thing. If this is how you change the law, here's all the bullet language you need, et cetera, et cetera. And then C, I have another interview I haven't posted yet because I've been so busy, where I did fertility clinic people and the whole bit, where you have sperm banks, you have egg banks, you have IVF clinics. So about how to do your own thing, I got to find the thing here. Essentially, in 100 years, men will just bypass women altogether and have your own baby. So 40% of people walking up a fertility clinic right now are heterosexual couples because she's too old or something wrong with him. Other 40% are LGBT. The other 20% right now are single men looking to avoid the family court because they don't want to have a rent-a-center baby where it's essentially I can't afford to pay $50,000 to have my own child. So it's called high quality affordable down in Colorado Springs. They're opening a thing in San Francisco and a thing in Dallas, where basically at $50,000 you have your own IVF and a gestational carrier. You're good to go. And you think about having an au pair for $20,000 a year for 2 or 3 years to have to keep going. And for basically $120,000, you have your own kids and you have zero liability. You have no splitting 50-50. You have no splitting 4 days a month, right? As a man, you are disposable and you are treated as such. And you need to realize what's going on. anyway, I have those. I'm going to have them all out when I get it together with
Sounds
my
good.
team. But I'm also trying to get my book done as well. So it's kind of a lot of work. It's a lot of back and forth. So.
Right. All
But
right.
anyway, it's Socialism Productions. You can take a look at a couple of those. Here's a GoFundMe. You can message me. I'll answer your questions if you
All right.
put a message down there. I'll take a look.
And one of the guys in the chat actually put how it's spelled so people can find it.
Yeah.
So it's
like
there in the chat.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Right.
So just Google Alexander Solzhenitsyn. You'll get the last name. There's a reason why I have it.
Right. And you went into that in the last video too, so people can watch that as well. All right. Next question.
All right, the next question is from Sticky Fingers Jr. for DDJ. How does one legally become a masculine presenting transgendered lesbian?
Actually, you just tell everybody that you are. And I mean, if you really want to go to like the Department of Licensing and have it changed there's a website out there that will help you do it. It's like like a transgender website, and it goes through all 50 states about, here are the laws that you need. Here are the things you need to do. You need to do an affidavit. You need to jump through a couple hoops. And then once you're identified as a masculine presenting transgender lesbian, you can then take it to the DOL, and then they will actually change the gender on your license.
Correct. So in like 15 states, or 14 states, they have laws that if you discriminate against a transgender, it's a hate crime. In Colorado, what you would do is you have to get a doctor's note and go through a bunch of hoops, and you go to the driver, and you go to the DMV and get it. California, it's simple. In Texas, you're going to have a very hard time in a conservative state pulling that off, to be honest with you. I've asked. I haven't finished mine for Colorado, but I will. I will eventually get it done. But in places like Texas, you're going to have a hell of a time doing it.
Right.
I was recommended to do it by an attorney because there's no way to get a woman jailed in a lot of states. It's damn near impossible. And so what happens is that if she assaults you, she trespasses you, she stalks you, she online bullies you, it's a hate crime. She gets to go to jail.
And there it is. All right, next question.
That is it, unless you have some bukkake choke slams.
Let's take a look and find out. I may or may not. I have only one, but it is halfway cut off, and they never got to the point of the question, so I'm going to refund their points and go from there. So it looks like we are good to go. Michael, again, thank you for taking the time out.
There is one thing.
It.
There's an Americans for Equal Shared Parenting going on in Denver on the 5th of August. I will be there. There will be a lot of speakers. I will be speaking, and there will be other speakers as well, talking about equal shared parenting. If you're thinking about it, I'm also thinking about, my group is thinking about doing the international conference here in Denver, trying to make that happen too. But August 5th, you can message me. I'll send you stuff, but it's here in Denver. You might consider doing it.
Well, yeah, and the other thing you can do too, after the stream ends, Michael, if you could send me links to all those things, I'll go ahead and put those in the description of the video when I do post-production and upload it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate everybody tuning in today. I'm going to do some post-production, and then I should have it uploaded either later this evening or first thing tomorrow morning. So thank you again. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and go from there. Take care.